How neuroplasticity can free out of overthinking. You know the feeling. Your mind won't stop running, as if trapped in a loop of what-ifs, should-haves, and why didn't I? It's like being locked inside a room where every thought echoes louder than the last, and no matter how hard you try, the door just won't open. The paradox is cruel. The more you think, the less you move, the less you live. Overthinking doesn't just steal your peace, it rewires your brain to make the cycle even stronger, as if you are carving trenches so deep that escape feels impossible. But here's the truth that most people don't know. Your brain is not fixed. It is alive, adaptable, and capable of change at any age. What feels like a prison is, in fact, a structure you can redesign, and the key lies in neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to rewire itself, to form new pathways, and let go of the old ones that keep you trapped in doubt and fear. It means that your patterns of thought are not destiny. They're habits your brain has practiced, and like any habit, they can be unlearned and replaced. Imagine your mind as a forest. The paths you walk most often become trails, beaten down and automatic. Overthinking is simply the path you've walked too many times. Neuroplasticity gives you the tools to step off that trail, to cut through the trees, and to carve new routes that lead not to paralysis, but to clarity, calm, and action. Science confirms what philosophy has whispered for centuries. You are not condemned to your current state of mind. Marcus Aurelius once wrote that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Today, neuroscience shows us exactly why, that thoughts literally sculpt the brain. The prison is real, but so is the door, and it is built into your biology. What if freedom was not about silencing the mind, but teaching it a new rhythm? What if the very chaos that drowns you today could become the raw material for building resilience, focus, and peace? That is the journey we're about to take together. A journey where you'll discover not abstract theories, but practical steps rooted in science and sharpened by centuries of wisdom. By the end, you won't just understand why you overthink. You'll see how to break the loop, how to redirect the power of your brain, and how to experience what it truly means to be free from the weight of endless thoughts. Type 1 to write the next topic or type the changes you want. You said, ChatGPT said, the science of mental loops. Overthinking doesn't happen by accident. It is not a flaw in your personality or a sign that you are broken. It is the result of how your brain is wired to keep you safe. At the center of this cycle is what neuroscientists call the default mode network, a set of brain regions that activate when your mind is not focused on a task. It's the same network that produces daydreaming, self-reflection, and planning, but when it becomes overactive, it turns inward and traps you in endless rumination. Instead of helping you prepare for the future, it replays fears, doubts, and unfinished conversations on repeat, like a record stuck in the same groove. Dopamine and serotonin, the brain's chemical messengers, also play a key role. Dopamine, often called the molecule of motivation, was designed to push you toward action. But in a loop of overthinking, dopamine gets hijacked by the brain's search for certainty. It keeps asking, what if? Because each possible answer delivers a small hit of temporary relief. The problem is, relief doesn't last, so the brain asks again and again, creating an addictive cycle of thought with no resolution. Serotonin, which stabilizes mood, often drops in this process, making each thought feel heavier, darker, and harder to escape. Cognitive behavioral therapy has long shown that thoughts are not neutral. They are rehearsals. The more often you think a certain way, the easier it becomes for the brain to fire those same circuits again. It is like carving grooves into a piece of wood. Each repetition makes the path deeper. That is why overthinking feels so automatic. Your brain has literally practiced it into existence. The tragedy is that this practice doesn't move you forward. It only convinces your brain that worrying is necessary, even when it's destroying your peace. But here's the critical insight. Because the brain is plastic, those grooves are not permanent. Neuroplasticity allows you to weaken them by redirecting attention and strengthening new patterns. The same system that locked you in can be retrained to let you out. And this is where everything changes. When you stop fighting thoughts and start reshaping the brain itself, overthinking loses its grip. Type 1 to write the next topic, or type the changes you want. You said, 1. ChatGPT said, neuroplasticity, the brain's reset button. If overthinking is the result of well-worn grooves in the brain, then neuroplasticity is the tool that lets you carve new ones. It is the ability of your nervous system to reorganize itself, to form new connections between neurons, and let old, unhelpful ones fade away. This process isn't reserved for childhood, as once believed. It continues throughout your entire life. Every new skill you learn, every habit you repeat, every thought you allow or redirect. Each of these moments is literally reshaping the architecture of your brain. Imagine your mind as a vast forest. Overthinking has forced you to walk the same trail so many times that it's become a beaten, automatic path, clear and irresistible, even if it leads nowhere. Neuroplasticity is your machete, giving you the power to cut a new way through the trees. At first, that new trail feels awkward and slow. The old path pulls at you with its familiarity. But each time you take the new route, it gets easier, the trail widens, and the forest begins to remember your choice. Meanwhile, the old path, unused, untrodden, starts to fade back into wilderness. Modern neuroscience backs this image with evidence. Studies on habit formation show that repetition, especially when paired with emotional intensity, strengthens synaptic connections, making them easier to fire the next time. This is why people can train themselves out of compulsions, addictions, or even traumatic responses. The same principle applies to overthinking. The more you redirect your attention and practice new thought patterns, the more your brain installs those routes as defaults. This is where hope enters. You don't have to eliminate every intrusive thought to be free. You only need to teach your brain another way to respond. Just as a muscle grows stronger with use, neural circuits grow more powerful with practice. What feels today like an unshakable identity, I am an overthinker, is nothing more than a practiced pattern, and patterns can be undone. Neuroplasticity is the reset button that proves your thoughts are not your fate. They are only your training. The question is not whether your brain can change, but whether you will choose to guide it. Type 1 to write the next topic, or type the changes you want. You said, 1. ChatGPT said, the myth of control versus the power of direction. One of the greatest traps in the fight against overthinking is the belief that you must control your thoughts. That if you could just silence the mind, force it into stillness, then peace would finally come. But this belief sets you up for failure. Why? Because the brain was never designed to be controlled. It was designed to be directed. The harder you try to stop your thoughts by sheer force, the louder they become. Like trying to hold water in your hands, the more tightly you squeeze, the more it slips through your fingers. The key isn't control, it's redirection. Neuroplasticity responds not to suppression, but to repetition. Every time you shift your focus away from mental noise and towards something meaningful, you're teaching your brain a new path to walk. At first, this shift may feel forced, even unnatural. That's because the old mental loop has had years of practice. But with every moment of conscious redirection, even if it lasts only seconds, you're reclaiming territory. You're showing your brain that it has another option. It's the difference between trying to silence a room full of shouting voices and calmly walking out the door. Most people waste their energy yelling back at their thoughts, trying to dominate them with logic or panic. But logic doesn't calm the anxious brain. It activates it further. What works is the quiet authority of direction, choosing a new thought, a new task, or a new breath to anchor yourself in. Neuroplasticity follows where you place your attention, not where you place your resistance. This is the turning point for many. The moment you stop seeing yourself as a failed controller of thoughts and start becoming a skilled director of attention, everything shifts. You stop fighting the mind like an enemy and start training it like a muscle. And just like a muscle, it doesn't need to be perfect to get stronger. It needs consistency, not dominance. The illusion of control has exhausted you. The truth of direction will liberate you. And this shift, from suppressing thoughts to guiding the brain, opens the door to lasting change. Because what you consistently choose to focus on, you inevitably become. Type 1 to write the next topic, or type the changes you want. You said, 1. ChatGPT said, micro-habits that reshape the brain. Transformation doesn't begin with grand breakthroughs. It begins in the smallest choices, the kind so subtle your mind almost dismisses them. Yet, in the realm of neuroplasticity, those small decisions are everything. Your brain doesn't change through information. It changes through repetition. And the most powerful rewiring happens through micro-habits, daily, intentional actions that seem insignificant in the moment, but quietly sculpt the architecture of your mind. Take breath control, for example. On the surface, it's just breathing, something automatic. But studies show that slow, conscious breathing through the nose activates the parasympathetic nervous system, calming your body and, crucially, reducing the brain's urgency to overprocess. It's not just relaxation, it's redirection. Each breath taken with awareness begins to decouple the body's panic response from the storm of thoughts, rewiring the link between anxiety and thinking. Cold exposure is another micro-habit, not for pain or toughness, but for pattern interruption. Andrew Huberman explains that short bouts of controlled stress like cold showers or plunges activate focus and raise dopamine levels over time, creating a baseline of motivation and presence that counters the sluggish inertia of overthinking. In these moments, you're not just shocking the body, you're giving the brain new evidence of safety and discomfort that rewires the belief that every uncertain moment needs to be solved before it's felt. Focused journaling also plays a critical role. Not the endless rehashing of your thoughts, but structured reflection. Writing a thought down, then immediately questioning its truth, engages the prefrontal cortex, the center of reason. It interrupts the emotional storm of the limbic system, allowing space for new interpretation. This is one of the foundational practices of cognitive behavioral therapy, and its impact on neuroplasticity is profound. When practiced regularly, it teaches the brain to disarm distorted thoughts before they solidify into beliefs. And then there's deliberate practice, choosing one intentional behavior each day that moves you slightly out of your comfort zone and into action. Overthinking thrives in inaction. Action, even small, reclaims control. Each step becomes proof that you are not your thoughts, and over time, your brain records this evidence until it becomes your new default. These micro-habits, repeated without drama, are more powerful than any one epiphany. They are the brick and mortar of a new brain. And with every breath, every cold shock, every written page, you are not just coping, you are rewiring. Type 1 to write the next topic or type the changes you want. You said, 1. ChatGPT said, the role of awareness, becoming the observer. The most radical shift in breaking free from overthinking doesn't come from trying harder. It comes from seeing differently. When you are lost inside your thoughts, you believe they are you. They speak with the voice of authority. They feel urgent, and they seem permanent. But there is a moment, quiet, often overlooked, when you become aware that you are thinking. That moment is everything, because it reveals something profound. You are not the voice in your head. You are the one listening. This is metacognition, the ability to observe your thoughts instead of being absorbed by them. It's a foundational tool in both cognitive behavioral therapy and mindfulness-based neuroscience. When you become the observer, your thoughts lose their grip. They stop being commands and start becoming content. And content can be chosen, changed, even ignored. From a neurological standpoint, this awareness interrupts the automatic firing of neural loops. It activates the prefrontal cortex, your center for conscious decision-making, and disengages the brain's default mode network. Instead of ruminating, your brain shifts toward evaluation and redirection. In that space, even if it lasts just seconds, You get to decide what happens next. You are no longer reacting, you are responding. But awareness must be trained. You don't just fall into it. That's why small practices, like asking, "What am I thinking right now?" or "Is this thought helping me?" create neural habits of observation. These questions, repeated daily, rewire the brain to pause before spiraling. Over time, your mind learns to recognize patterns without being consumed by them. This practice is not about detachment in the cold sense. It's about intimacy with your inner world. When you observe your thoughts without judgment, you begin to see which ones are yours and which ones are echoes of fear, habit, or someone else's voice entirely. That clarity is power. It's the first step in choosing a new mental reality. You cannot control what appears in your mind, but you can change your relationship to it. And that single change, shifting from participant to observer, is where freedom begins. It is not escape, it is awareness. And with awareness, the brain begins to learn. This thought does not own me. Type 1 to write the next topic or type the changes you want. You said, ChatGPT said, emotions as the gateway to rewiring thoughts are not the most powerful force shaping your brain. Emotions are. While overthinking appears to be purely mental, it is anchored in how your nervous system feels. And it is precisely because emotional states are chemically intense that they leave deeper imprints in the brain. Joe Dispenza explains that emotions are the glue that bonds thoughts into identity. Without emotion, thoughts are like sand. But when drenched in fear, regret, or anxiety, those same thoughts harden into concrete beliefs. That's why simply trying to think differently fails. If the emotion stays the same, the thought returns with the same force. But when you learn to change the emotional state first, the thought loses its power. And this is not magic, it's biology. The limbic system, responsible for emotion, connects directly with areas of the brain responsible for memory, attention, and decision-making. When you feel safe, loved, or empowered, your brain becomes receptive to new wiring. Gratitude is one of the fastest tools for this. Not performative, forced gratitude, but deep, sensory gratitude felt in the body. It has been shown to increase serotonin and reduce cortisol, opening up the brain's plasticity. In that state, you're more capable of shifting thoughts, because the fear that once held them in place begins to dissolve. Visualization is another key. When you imagine a new state, not abstractly, but vividly, with color, sound, emotion, you fire the same neural pathways as if it were real. And if you do it repeatedly, your brain begins to encode that imagined reality as a viable possibility. This primes your nervous system to move toward it, to feel more natural in calm than in chaos. Embodiment practices anchor this process. Movement, posture, breathwork. These aren't just self-help trends. They send messages back to the brain that the body is safe, and safety is the soil where rewiring grows. A brain that feels constantly threatened will cling to old thought patterns for survival, but a brain that feels secure can take risks, explore new beliefs, and let go of the loops that once felt protective. If you want to change your mind, you must begin by changing your state. Emotions are not obstacles to thought, they are the architects of it. When you shift how you feel, you open the door to shift how you think. And in that opening, neuroplasticity does its quiet, powerful work. Type 1 to write the next topic or type the changes you want. You said, 1. ChatGPT said, Stoic and philosophical echoes. Long before science had a name for neuroplasticity, the Stoics were practicing its principles with unshakable discipline. Marcus Aurelius, sitting alone in the quiet torment of power, wrote that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Seneca taught that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. These were not abstract reflections. They were tools, sharpened by centuries, to train the mind to obey reason rather than chaos. Today, neuroscience confirms what they intuited. The brain becomes what it repeats, and suffering often grows in the soil of mental rehearsal. The Stoics didn't try to silence their thoughts. They observed them, redirected them, and trained the mind like a muscle, not a mystery. They practiced mental exercises daily, premeditatio malorum, journaling, reframing, that we now recognize as powerful forms of cognitive rewiring. What they called philosophy, we now call metacognition. What they described as virtue, we now map as emotional regulation and executive function. René Descartes, centuries later, stripped knowledge to its core and declared, cogito, ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. But he didn't mean overthinking. He meant conscious, structured thought. The kind of thinking that sees itself, questions itself, and builds from clarity, not confusion. Descartes believed that doubt was not a flaw, it was a tool. Doubt led to refinement, and refinement led to truth. In the modern world, we've mistaken doubt as paralysis, but it was never meant to trap. It was meant to cleanse. To live without being ruled by your thoughts is not to ignore them, but to reshape them. Aristotle taught that we become what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. And in the context of neuroplasticity, this insight becomes literal. The circuits you engage are the ones that grow. The ones you ignore shrink. Every action, every choice, every repetition is a vote cast for the person you are becoming. When science meets philosophy, a new kind of clarity emerges. You are not powerless. You are not doomed to repeat patterns simply because they are familiar. The Stoics endured war, exile, plague, and betrayal, yet maintained inner peace. Not because life was easy, but because the mind was trained. Today, you have access to the same mental architecture, plus the tools to see it with MRI scans and chemical signatures. But the principle remains. You direct your thoughts, or they direct you. The mind has always been moldable. What's different now is that we can see it with microscopes. But the discipline to reshape it, that still lives in choice. And that choice is available now, in this very moment, as you listen. Type 1 to write the next topic or type the changes you want. You said, 1. ChatGPT said, from chaos to clarity, building a mental toolkit. You don't need more information, you need a method. Knowing that your brain can change is not enough. You need to know how to guide it. Overthinking thrives in the absence of structure, and your brain, left untrained, will default to the familiar noise. But when you introduce a clear framework, even simple, your mind begins to follow it like rails guiding a train. Clarity isn't born from silence. It's built from intention, repetition, and choice. The first tool is awareness, not as a vague ideal, but as a practiced pause. Every time you catch yourself spiraling in a thought loop and say, "This is not helping," you light up your prefrontal cortex and interrupt the automated cycle. You don't have to fix the thought. You only need to see it and name it. That single moment of awareness is the first break in the chain. The second tool is redirection. Once you've interrupted the thought, you need somewhere to send your attention. Choose one action. Move your body. Speak a new sentence out loud. Write down what you want to focus on instead. Redirection isn't ignoring the problem. It's reinforcing a new neural path by choosing what matters now. The brain learns through where attention goes. Attention becomes identity. The third tool is reinforcement. Your brain doesn't believe what you tell it once. It believes what you tell it repeatedly, emotionally, and experientially. That's why pairing redirection with movement, sound, breath, or a visual anchor makes it more powerful. The more senses involved, the deeper the pattern sets. And the more emotionally engaged you are, whether through gratitude, urgency, or even determination, the faster the wiring takes hold. Think of this process like laying bricks. Each moment of awareness, each act of redirection, each layer of reinforcement adds another stone to the foundation of a new mental habit. Miss a day? It's fine. The structure still stands. What matters is that you keep building. Neuroplasticity is not about perfection. It's about momentum. This toolkit doesn't promise you'll never overthink again. but it does give you the means to stop being dominated by your thoughts, to reclaim agency, to move from mental noise to mental architecture, from a storm with no direction to a mind that knows how to find its way back to calm. The brain does not change with theory, it changes with training. And now you have a method to begin. Type 1 to write the next topic or type the changes you want. You said, 1 ChatGPT said, the new identity, becoming someone free of overthinking. You can't build a new brain while clinging to the identity of your old one.
If every day you tell yourself, I'm just an overthinker, your brain takes that as instruction. It reinforces the same synaptic paths, the same emotional states, the same compulsions to analyze everything to death. The identity becomes the cage, and the irony is that you're the one who keeps locking the door.
But what if you stopped describing yourself by your struggles? What if you started naming yourself by the direction you're choosing? The most profound transformations begin not with action, but with identity. When you see yourself as someone who trains the mind rather than suffers it, you begin to behave differently. You observe instead of reacting. You redirect instead of spiraling. And each time you do, your brain records it, not as a fluke, but as evidence. Over time, that evidence reshapes the very idea of who you are. And when identity changes, behavior becomes automatic. This is not about lying to yourself. It's not pretending you don't struggle. It's choosing a higher narrative. Instead of saying, I'm anxious, say, I'm someone learning to create calm. Instead of, I'm overthinking everything, try, I'm practicing new patterns of thought. These aren't affirmations to chant in the mirror. They are neural blueprints. Your words shape your mind because your brain listens, always. Neuroplasticity responds faster when there is alignment between thought, action, and identity. The more those three move in the same direction, the stronger the new circuitry becomes. And this is where many people fail. They try new actions while clinging to old labels. That dissonance creates friction, and friction leads to relapse. You can't become someone new while staying loyal to who you were. So the question isn't, how do I stop overthinking? The real question is, who am I becoming? And if your answer is honest, intentional, and practiced, your brain will follow. Because identity is not fixed, it is trained. And the training starts the moment you stop repeating the story of limitation and start rehearsing the story of growth. You are not your thoughts. You are not your fear. You are the one who chooses what to build next. And what you build with enough consistency becomes who you are. Type 1 to write the next topic, or type the changes you want. You said 1. ChatGPT said, closing impact, the invitation to rewire your life. You've seen the patterns. You've understood the loops. And now you know this. Your mind is not broken. It's trained. And everything it learned through years of overthinking, it can now unlearn through clarity, direction, and repetition. This isn't wishful thinking. It's the biology of transformation. Your thoughts, your habits, your emotional defaults, they've all been shaped by experience. And experience is not destiny. It's simply data. And today, you get to give your brain new data to work with. Neuroplasticity is not passive. It waits for your participation. Every moment you pause, choose, act, breathe, or redirect, you are not just coping, you are building. You are laying down the mental infrastructure of a new reality. And while the change may feel slow at first, the shift is already happening, because the brain remembers movement more than intention. And now that you've moved, the process is alive. So where do you begin? Start small. Choose one moment today to observe your thought instead of obeying it. Choose one breath to anchor yourself when your mind starts racing. Choose one new action to interrupt the old cycle. Not to fix yourself, but to show your brain that a new way is possible. That possibility becomes repetition. Repetition becomes wiring. Wiring becomes you. This is not a journey of escape. It's a journey of return. Back to your mind as a place of clarity, not chaos. Back to your body as an ally, not a battlefield. Back to your life as something you shape, not something you survive. Every thought you choose today is carving your future, brain. Every choice is casting a vote for who you are becoming. And the next moment is yours to define. The freedom you've been searching for is not out there. It is already forming inside you, synapse by synapse, breath by breath. The door is open. Now walk through.